Hey, Larsen here, welcome to the newest EDM Production tutorial. This time it is number 4, and what I want to talk about today is how I mix and how I process my trap drums. I made the song like a few months ago and this is how it sounded. Never mind, the song itself is not very interesting, but this is the drums for it. But before we jump into it, let me encourage you to subscribe and hit the little bell icon to receive notifications whenever I upload new videos. I upload Synthesize Sunday tutorials on every Sunday, EDM Production tutorials on every Wednesday, and song feedback sessions on every Friday. So if you don't want to miss any of these, smash those buttons for good. So what I did here is I used a regular loop I made for a hybrid trap pack or something. So this is only the tops loop, and I EQ'd out every element from like I don't remember, like 2K, and I cut a little on the highs. So without the EQing it sounds this, and also I made some cuts, you know, where I cut out the snare. So on itself it sounds this. Okay, so basically this is not only the tops, but it's a full loop, so I just EQ'd out the unwanted frequencies to use it as a tops loop. Anyway, this is not very interesting. What I want to talk about today is the kick. So this is a regular 808 kind of kit what I use from drums. So we have this 808 core kit, so this is what I use here, just to compare it to you guys. So as you can see, all the stuff here is the same, so I use this, and you know, it sounds pretty weak. Let me compare it to you, that if I use the same MIDI, so let me drop it here, like, come on. Okay, so this is originally how it sounds. So it's pretty boring, but with my process, so obviously you may say, okay, the guy used only compression and saturation, what is the point here? Yeah, I did, but some of you guys I think you may learn something from this process what I used here. So the first step, I used my kick drum, so I didn't want to have the full length because, you know, the kick drum would turn into a sub bass or something. I didn't want it because I wanted to use, and I did use a different sub, so I just cut out the tails basically, and I used some fade. And you know, in Ableton 10 we have a drum bass stuff here in the audio effect, so Ableton 10 must go out pretty soon. So here we have a drum bass, and I use a preset like drum sharpener. It must be here somewhere, never mind. So basically I use some soft saturation, soft drive, and I boosted the transients pretty hard. And this is all. So without all the mastering effects what I applied on the full group or on the full master, my kick drum sounds something like this. So as you can hear, it turned a lot harder. So okay, this is the master, this EQ goes on the full group, so not only the kick. And going to the snare, I didn't do anything here, I just added some highs, and on the claps too. I also boosted the highs on the EQ, and I added another drum bass, but this time on the full group, so not only the kick, but on the kick, the snare, and the clap too. This time I use a little harder transient, and I use the compressor, the built-in compressor, and I use a little harder, a little more aggressive drive. Now altogether, with all these effects and the drums bass activated, this is how the drum groove sounds. Now the real interesting part is here on the master track or master bass, where I use a master rack. The first what I did here is I compressed really hard the low end from about everything below 160 Hz. So let me deactivate the rest of the effects. So this is very minimal processing, but you can hear that on the drums it creates some pretty nice and pretty heavy, you know, it takes away the very subby kind of part and turns the kick into a very hard kick. Now you may say, okay, this sounds even worse. So let's go further at the EQ, where I cut out everything below, well, around 30-40 Hz. And this is very important because this kick contains lots of low end, I mean very subby kind of low end, what we don't really need in a kick drum. So we don't want a 30 Hz or even 40 Hz sub on the kick, because, you know, it would just take so much energy and so much power on the low end, which we don't really hear and don't really need because we have our sub for that. So if I take away everything below, well, around 30-40 Hz, we have a lot more energy on the kick. So I also did the same on the sides because we don't need any stereo information on the very lows. So with the EQ it sounds this. I also added some volume to it, and now a multi-band dynamics. I added some volume again, and I didn't use 100% wet, but around, well, you know, 70% or 77%, and another compressor. And this time I activated a soft clip because, you know, I didn't want to use a limiter to lose all the transients and all the cool harmonics what we created using some saturation basically. So with the cool compressor it sounds this. Now the fun part here is if I play around with the EQ and if I, you know, just tweak the high pace cutoff, you know, to save more energy on the kick. It will turn the kick into a more hard hitting kick, and the whole mix down will be, I would say, a little better. Now the problem here is that our kick is too long. I mean, I can hear some, I don't know, like overcompressed distortion something. So what I want to do here is play around with the length of the kick and with the fade out. Okay, so basically we went from this sound. Let me just compare what we did here. And this is pretty cool because you don't need to add anything basically on these drums but the instruments. You can compress the instruments, the basses, the sub individually or separately, and on the master you don't need to add too much. You just, you know, glue together like using minimal compression and saturation limiting. This is very cool. And we turned our sound, we don't go to master, but we want to go to real master. So we don't need this compressor on the clap, snare. Okay, everything is empty. So we went from this drums to this. And once again, in this song, you know, which is a very hard-hitting trap song, I think we wouldn't be able to use this kind of process. You You may say, okay, this is only some very hard saturation, so okay, let's do that. Push up the transient, push up the drive, click on the soft clip. Okay, let's add some glue compressor, like boosting up the attack ratios, pretty hard transients, what I want to achieve with these settings. So it is still not the same. So, you know, processing your drums is essential if you want to create some very hard-hitting stuff. And if you are curious what we did with the drums, I mean, maybe we generated too much distortion, too much clipping and overdrive and stuff. Let me just show you. Oops, sorry, resampling. So the very first part of the kick is distorted a little, but that's okay, because we are talking about trap, and a trap kick is always made of, well, huge saturation, you know, to create those harmonics, which makes the sound even harder. And it's okay. I think this kick is still a little too long, so if you want, you can, you know, just pull them back a little. But anyway, your mix with your sub and with the other basses, other instruments will, you know, decide if it's too long or if it's too short. It really depends on the surroundings. But anyway, I think this kick sounds pretty good from the original 808, which looks like this. So show it browser, drop it here. So yeah, it is like a little overdriven, but as I said before, in trap it is okay. I see lots of producers use overdriven or oversaturated kick drums, but in a very good mixed surrounding, it just sounds pretty good. So this is a very hard process on your kick drum. So this is a very hard process on your drums, but I think it is worth, because in this example, as you can see, I think it sounds pretty fat and pretty awesome. So this is how I process my drums. I don't always boost them this much, I don't always compress them this much, but I think in this case, in this example, especially in trap, you really want to add crazy kind of process. If you find it too much, then pull them back a little, use it to your own taste, but this is how I made it. And it sounds pretty good. So I was Dan Larsson, and see you next time, guys. Bye bye.